When I hired on as a brand new South Dakota game warden in 1983, I wasn't the only new hire. To think that there were 6 brand new officers coming on at the same time was pretty much unheard of. Well, they wanted to get us some initial training because we didn't just get hired and go to the academy. We actually were assigned our duty station and had up to 1 year to attend the academy. In my case, I'd been in my duty station 9 months, and I was working law enforcement before I went to the academy. 9 months. It was during one of these in-service training sessions where the chief warden at the time made a comment that it floored me. And I realized, what am I getting into? Well, I kind of had an idea what I was getting into in terms of the duties, but I'm talking about the public perspective. He said that if one of you guys ever has to shoot somebody, you had better already be shot, bleeding, and laying on your back on the ground before you pull the trigger. Now think about that coming from the chief game warden. What was he saying? He was saying that the public doesn't like South Dakota game wardens. They don't think that you're real law enforcement, and if you have to shoot someone, they're not going to accept it. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. So the only chance you're going to have of being able to survive a shooting, if you actually physically survive it, is to have already been shot before you return fire. That's wrong. It was wrong then and it's wrong now. It only makes sense that there must have been some kind of incident that served as the genesis for that level of hatred and lack of support. I mean, look at all the things that we see in these YouTube videos, the police doing and getting away with time after time, and we know what the effect is. The effect is it's going to erode public support for the officers in the agency. People aren't going to support or like or trust the officers. There was nothing like that in South Dakota. Nothing. Not even a yelling match. No lawsuits, no use of force claims, no officers sticking a foot in somebody's front door to keep them from closing the door. Nothing. It was a general dislike and disdain for wildlife law enforcement, and therefore, because we were the enforcement agents, we were hated. It was like night following day. At the time of this incident, keep in mind that I had been an officer for 8 years, not 8 minutes, although that's what it's going to look like. It was because of this programming. By that point in my career, I was a certified firearm instructor. I had range master, a certified use of deadly force instructor. I trained officers in weapons retention and weapons disarming tactics. It's not that I was a rube. It wasn't that I was a rookie. I only acted that way. I was willing to sacrifice myself to the gods of public relations, the Rodney King can't we all just get along game warden who was willing to go to the grave in order to avoid debtor's prison or worse, real prison. Was something that stayed with me. That kind of programming, it stayed with me. When I retired, I had been the chief game warden for the state of South Dakota for 7 years. During those 7 years, I never told any officer, new or otherwise, that, you know what, before you pull the trigger in a deadly force encounter, how about you do me a little favor? I need you to make sure you've already been shot, that you're bleeding, and you're laying on the ground on your back. The more times you've been shot and the faster you're bleeding out, that only helps the cause. Of course not. That'd be stupid. What they heard was, don't do what I did that night. Don't make the same mistakes that I made that night. Use me as the bad example, the example of what not to do. What you're about to see, it's really bad. Just imagine being there. Have a plan, train to your plan, make sure you carry. Have a plan, train to your plan, and make sure you carry. Promise me. The takeaway is something like this could happen to any one of us at any time. Remember, you promised. Why do I mention the wind speed and wind direction? Because it was blown over my shoulder from me to them. So I couldn't hear what was going on. I was deaf. I had the visual advantage. They didn't even know I was there. But I was deaf. I couldn't hear shots fired. Not if it had been anything other than a larger caliber firearm. I couldn't hear conversations. I couldn't hear music. If someone was yelling or screaming, chances are I wouldn't have heard that either. Something else I don't think many people think of is when I made my approach, when I drove up to them in order to make contact, I wanted to have 100% surprise on my side, and I did. Now, one of the things I did when I drove down from my surveillance site, I crept all the way down because I had very aggressive tread tires, and I was driving on loose gravel roads. When you have aggressive tread tires on loose gravel and you're going any speed at all, do you know how much noise that makes? So everything was about sound or noise discipline. So when I left my surveillance spot, I crept and crept and crept until I got about 15 or so yards behind them. I stopped and I parked. I just kept watching for another 15 or 20 seconds. I remember this so vividly. They had no idea I was there. They had no idea that I was there until I hit them with the red lights first. I always did that. And then the high beams and the spotlight, the takedown lights. I wanted them to see the red lights before the blinding light. You can see why. I didn't want anybody to claim I didn't know about the red lights because we were already blinded. It's just the way I did business. You see all the different things that you have to keep in mind, or you should keep in mind, or at least I kept in mind. So what was the reaction upon me turning my lights on? Well, the young lady on the right, she panicked and threw the beer can she was holding up in the air and threw it over into the ditch. So that was a littering violation, and she looked really young, so I figured it was probably going to be an underage consumption as well. So now I'm already well into my investigation. I have crimes that have occurred in my presence. Now it's going to be a matter of just how far is it going to go, and you're not going to believe how far it's going to go. And here's what happened. I'm now focused on the three young men, and I don't want to make contact. I want one of them to come back to me to begin with. I want to split them up. So I picked the one in the middle, and I described his clothing. I said, I need you to walk to my truck. The other two stay put. Don't you dare move from that car until I tell you to move. Well, the one in the middle started walking back to my truck. The problem was the other two came right along with them, shoulder to shoulder. Allow me to describe their individual personalities as they were advancing towards me. The one on the left, the fat guy, he was screaming profanities and threats of violence the entire time, just out of his mind. The one on the right, he was out of his mind. He kept his hands up the entire time that he advanced towards me, and he was yelling, don't shoot us, don't shoot me. Are you going to shoot us? Oh, come on, you're not going to shoot us. And the one in the middle never said a single word. He was the only one who remained quiet. And that's what they did. They just lined up three abreast, and they started walking at me, closing the distance step by step. I'm ordering them to stop. They won't stop. I'm ordering them to stop. They won't stop. I keep ordering them to stop, but they're not listening. And so they just keep walking three abreast right up until they got to the front of my truck, only offset a little bit to the left, maybe 5 feet from me. And they're all still doing the same thing. The fat bastard on the left, yelling out all these profane threats. One in the middle saying nothing, got his hands in his pockets. And the guy on the right's got his hands up, laughing, don't shoot us, don't shoot me, don't shoot us, whatever. And that's when I finally yelled, I know there's a fucking gun here, and I need you to back up. I know there's a fucking gun here, and I need you to back up. I didn't see the guy in the middle, the quiet one. I didn't see him take the gun out of the front of his waistband. Too much stuff was going on. I was overwhelmed. And that had to have been the goal, and if it was, they were successful. This is what happens when you get into this. I can't make people mad because somebody might complain to the governor. The public's always right, I'm always wrong. And if they complain, I'm probably going to get fired. And people can take this bullshit against the cops too far. It happens a lot in South Dakota when it comes to my former profession. I didn't see it until right here. Everything the young man in the middle did, he did voluntarily. He took that gun out of the front of his waistband, laid it on the ground all on his own. But what if it had been one of the other two assholes who had that pistol in the front of their waistband rather than the quiet guy in the middle? Well, why would I ask that? Wait till you hear the end of the story. Holy crap, where do I even begin? Well, I told the guy in the middle to stay put, keep his hands where I could see them, and told the other guys that now they needed to go back to the fucking car. And profanity was the choice of the day at that point. So they went back. I didn't have a chance to pat them down. I can't do any of that. I've got to budget my time and resources. Remember, there's still an unsecured female, too. I don't even remember where she was through the whole thing because my attention had been so thoroughly taken up by the three guys. I mean, she could have just gone around the backside, and I mean, there's just, what a nightmare. So I'm focused on the immediate threat, which is the gun on the ground, the guy who put it there, who's still standing above the gun. So once I get the two assholes headed back toward the car, which was headed back in the right direction finally, I had the quiet guy in the middle, I had him turn around so he could no longer immediately index where that gun was on the ground, and that's when I got him handcuffed. That's when I reached down and secured the gun, I unloaded it, and I'll just make a note now that the second round down in the mag had been loaded backwards. They'd been drinking, it was night, they had messed up the loading of the magazine. Oh, heck, it just hit me that some of you probably want to know what kind of gun it was that the guy pulled out of his waistband that night. Well, it was this kind of gun. Yeah, Smith & Wesson Model 41. That's a high-end piece of machinery. What was a motley crew like this doing with a gun like that? Well, just stay tuned, because this story keeps getting better and better. I do a more thorough search. I find and remove a can of pepper spray from one of the pockets of his jacket. I walk him around, put him in my truck. I seatbelt him in, go around, get behind the wheel, read him his Miranda warnings, and I start my interrogation. And what a liar. What a lying sack of crap. Do you think maybe the gun is stolen? Yeah. 1016H. Got that hit. You betcha. Turns out that the gun was stolen. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but when I asked him, okay, it's a stolen gun, what's the story? Oh, I didn't know it was stolen. I bought it off of some guy at the Empire Mall parking lot for $50. What's his name? Well, I just know him by Spider. Well, you're going to have to work with me a little bit on this. I knew he was lying, but I just didn't know how badly he was lying. Well, a deputy sheriff showed up. All four were taken into custody. All four. They each had outstanding warrants, but then it went beyond that. But then I decided, I think I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill out a chain of custody form and write up a supplemental that I'll submit later, but I'm going to turn everything over to Deputy Mollengrath with the Minnehaha County Sheriff's Department, because this is something that their detectives are going to want to follow up on. And it turned out I was right. What happened was that when the detectives with the sheriff's office started working the case, they found out that this was a crew of daytime burglars, and they were hitting homes on the east side of Sioux Falls, only targeting guns. They only wanted to steal guns. And they had stolen this target pistol, this Model 41, during one of their home burglaries on the east side of Sioux Falls. But unlike the other guns, they decided they didn't want to sell this one. Why? Because it was simply too cool and too much fun to sell. All because 80-some-year-old Mrs. Raymond Weedy at 1 o'clock in the morning wasn't able to sleep. She's in her kitchen. She's looking out her kitchen window right over the sink, and she sees a suspicious vehicle. She's got my number. I've got her number because she's a confidential informant, even though she's in her 80s. Well, now you know the rest of the story.